what exactly do we owe our aging parents if the relationship isn't so hot? I know there's a lot of you out there who have folks who are getting older. I imagine this confession is going to start some discussions. I'm Laurie March, project manager and problem solver, and this is True Home Confessions, brought to you by Renewal by Andersen. Let's listen.
So, my mom is steadily losing her autonomy, and she currently lives alone. She's just having a lot of health issues, which mainly include falling to the floor and just having trouble walking. Problem is my mother hates people and refuses to live in community housing for elders. She claims she will never own a property with an HOA because it gives tyrannical people power over you. So she refuses to move to a condo with an elevator. It's a lot. However, my husband and I, we've saved up to buying our first home, and the idea's come up to get a duplex with her. She has the money to pay for her half, and I'd be happy to bring her groceries and just deal with snow, do like the grass cutting, just maintain the place. But we've been living in an apartment with neighbors, and all we've wanted since we got together was our own place where we could have parties, live our life in our yard, and just, have our own house. So imagine having my mother on the other side of the wall is just reawakened a lot of my anxiety, but I feel like I'm not seeing a lot of other options. So, no, do I owe my aging, terrible mother my mental health until she's gone? I'm curious to hear what you think.
As you just heard, every episode we field an anonymous confession about the crazy things going on in your homes. From real estate regrets to neighbor drama and fights with your spouse. Next up, I bring on a guest, a friend of the show, so we can test out the value of friendly advice. Afterward, I'm bringing you an expert who's going to solve our caller's sticky situation. And then they'll let us know if our friends are really qualified to solve our toughest problems at home. Today's friend of the show is LA-based comedian Nikki Bon.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay.
What did you think about that?
I didn't understand what the first thing she said was, and I was like, wait, what does that mean? And then as she went on, I was like, oh, this sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to listen. My mom moved here from Toronto to LA, okay? And she can cut her own grass, but it's a lot of responsibility.
Having a mom is
A lot of responsibility.
Yeah. I have a mom too, and
yeah.
She's 3,000 miles away.
She's
my sister's responsibility.
There you go.
Yeah.
Your sister, you are not nice. You're like,
correct.
Okay, bye, sister.
But yeah, I did that.
I get that the mom doesn't want to be in community living because I think that a lot of people think that way, and I get that.
Yeah.
So I'd force her in. I would do a rehab, or just do that whole thing. Wake them up in the middle of the night, what they used to do. Just
throw them in a van.
Throw them in a van, put a bag over their head, and get them out of there. Because honestly, it seems mean now, but otherwise, you're the one waking up at 3 a.m. to them being like, "Oh, I need this."
Yep.
I also think it depends how much your mom has done for her in her life.
I did catch the very last line where the caller said, "What do I owe my terrible aging mother for the rest of her life?"
Yes, that was a nightmare, because it's like, was she terrible your whole life, or was she just terrible as she's going senile? Because I'm like, if she's terrible your whole life, yeah, get her. You don't know her shit. I can say shit. Okay.
You can say shit.
Okay, you don't owe her anything. In fact, I'd get my revenge and punish her. You know what I mean? I'd be like, you earned this. But if she was good to you, then maybe don't take her in the middle of the night. Maybe take her at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
And say you're going for tea.
Yeah. And then, but still the van.
Still the van.
Yeah.
Still the van. I mean, it's the whole effect. You can take videos. You can give advice. This is how you put your mom, you get her out of here.
Oh, turn it into advice to other people.
Yeah, advice to other people. Maybe they should start a business of how to get your terrible elderly parents to the home. You know what I mean? Like that's because don't people like when they're trying to get their friends to go to a rehab center, they like set it up where they're like, okay, come and have coffee with me, and then they take them.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. And for like mental health stuff, come have coffee with me. And it happened to my friend's sister. And they're like, oh, yeah, I haven't seen you in so long. And they get coffee. And then they say, hey, you want to go to this one other spot? And then you put them in the car. And then you pull up to the center.
Whoa.
That's what I would do with my mom. Yeah. I'm not going to do that to your mom, okay? You were a good mom. But it's just, you know.
But it's a possibility.
It's a possibility. That's crazy if they're mean.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too. The mom said she didn't want to live in a condo complex because it gives tyrannical people power over you.
I don't even know what tyrannical means.
So like I think she's talking about the HOA. Like if you're in a condo complex, you have an HOA, right? And so then there's a couple people on the HOA that are like the president and the vice president, a couple people, but they're like your neighbors.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, interesting. So she doesn't want power. She's like, you don't own me.
Yeah.
But yet she wants power over other people.
Seems like it.
Yeah, I'd throw her in the home. I'd throw her in their effing home.
I love it. I feel like after the last few years, a lot of people can really relate to their parents feeling more maybe stubborn, belligerent, or like opinionated. I do feel like that's happening out there a lot.
And listen, I think that they're allowed to be opinionated. They lived longer than us. And that's just because I'm getting older and then like all the little young shits are like, we know everything. I'm like, you actually don't. So I get it.
Sure.
But if you're mean to people, then you deserve to be punished. I don't know what to say. Or she does like keep her as her neighbor. That was the other option.
Right. So she talked about, the caller mentioned that she and her husband had saved up for a house and that mom had money. It sounded like mom has enough money to pay the other half, but they were thinking about going in on a duplex with mom. So confessor and husband on one side and mom on the other side.
So I would say that if you do, I feel like you have to treat your parents like their children when they get to that age. I sound like the devil, but this is what. Listen, if they're nice people, but if they've been tyrants your whole life, I think that she should. It's like, well, okay, fine, I'll have you on the other side, but I'm not doing anything for you because if you think you don't need help from to be in a home,
right?
Then fine, you can do it yourself. You know, I'm sure that her mom, when she was growing up, was like, oh, you want that pair of roller skates? You got to make your own money to afford it then, and then go get a job. So it's kind of like, oh, you want somebody to cut your grass? Not going to be me. Go get a job. Fend for yourself.
I'm wondering what kind of job mom is going to be able to do from the duplex. Mom falls. It sounds like she's losing her autonomy and falling down. So what kind of job do you think mom is going to be able to get to afford the grass cutting?
I think that you could hire her to, if you're like dealing with healthcare problems, you know, when you think you owe money, when they're like you owe money and you don't, or like Spectrum is upping your wireless bill. I think you use that tyrant mother to call up and fight. I think you hire her to fight.
She becomes a tyrant for you.
Yeah, she's a hire tyrant.
Hire a tyrant.
And then she calls up these people for you and is like, no, I don't want the bill to be this much, and fights it. That's what I think she'd be good at.
I think so too, actually.
Yeah. Hire a tyrant.
This is powerful.
Put them to work, you know? And then I think if you can make the deal, okay, fine, you can live there, but I want nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And she says, okay. And she falls, but you gotta let it go. You gotta be like, yeah, she's fallen. Call 911. I'm not here.
So you're not even giving her the necklace with the button on it?
No. She can have that.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't go to you.
It doesn't go to me.
911.
It goes to 911. Yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah. So what happens when you want to throw a party and you live in this house?
Yeah.
are we giving mom rules about she's not allowed to come out during the party into the backyard?
Yeah, I think you lock her in.
Nikki!
I think you lock her up. We turn on, she's going to take naps anyways. I think you do a party on hold. So it's like, hey guys, I'm going to have a party this week. I don't know which day yet, but keep these times open every day. And then when mom falls, you have the party. She can't get up and ruin it.
You're dark. I thought you were going to say falls asleep, but we went straight to when mom falls down. She's good.
Yeah, she's good. Yeah,
we'll turn the music up when 911 comes with the siren.
Yeah.
You know, or find some music with sirens.
Yeah, or just maybe wait till she's like taken away to have the party.
Wow.
You know, just really disconnect, setting boundaries. Listen, I haven't had a tyrant parent like that, but I can't even imagine. I have been treated poorly by tyrant old people. And maybe this is me getting a little angry.
You know, it's so funny. When I heard this confession, I thought of you because I follow you on Instagram. And one of the things that I enjoy the most about following you is your series with your dad.
Yes.
And how you guys are like navigating your way in this chapter. So if you have a second, can you tell me a little bit about how this project came about?
Okay. So my dad wasn't around like until, I don't know, I was 20, 25, 26. And even still, it's been like trying to get him to stick around type thing. Like he's just a musician. He's just like a jazz drummer, rock and roll. Like he's lived his goddamn life and it must be nice. And so one day I was like, you have no idea like how to even communicate as a father. By that, I mean like the biggest thing that happened was he told me that I'm great as a comedian and like all the good things. And also that I look sexy on stage. And I was like, okay, that is something you can't say to you, people that are related to you even. Yeah. And he was so like, no, I don't mean it like that. But it's because he's like lived on the road his whole life. And it's like road lingo. And he's never had to like censor himself for a kid. And I was like, okay, we have to do a podcast where I teach you how to be a father. So that's how it came to be. And same with like the voicemails. He leaves me the longest voicemails and he'll talk about like sex. He'll talk about like taking shits. He'll like things where I'm like, this isn't a father-daughter. It's like a friend. That's how he is. And so that's how it came to be. And then like we did a podcast with me, Whoa Dad, teaching him how to be a father. And then he was like, I've had enough of this. And then like leaves again. And then now he wants to find aliens. And I'm like, okay, like wait, if that's what you want to teach me about aliens, come on back. Let's try it again. So now it's kind of like, it's navigating our relationship and the ridiculous things. Like even when he comes and visits me, it's like me cleaning up after him. I'm living with a child. But then it's hard because I'm like, oh my God, conditioning isn't a thing. Like I am so much like you. Like you are leaving stuff all over the floor, and then all of a sudden I'll see my sunglasses in the middle of the doorway, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm Bobby. I'm actually my dad. So that's how it came to be. And then now, we're more so capitalizing on the fact that like I've always wanted to share this, but he's a bit more camera shy. But now that he sees and like people appreciate him, but he can also see like that it's silly. Yeah. I think because baby boomer generations are so ashamed of who they are, and like they don't want to go to therapy, they don't want to admit their faults, they don't want to say what they did bad because of, I think it's shame what their parents taught them. Yep. And interesting. Yeah, I think that their parents were like, be perfect, don't cry. We had to go through the war, we had to go through depression, you don't understand anything. Be happy. And so then now our generation is like, hey guys, you screwed us up. And they're like, no, we didn't. We're fine, you know? Right. And so he's so ashamed, where I'm like, Dad, you left, you abandoned me, you came back, you're really silly, you're stupid. Like, let's just have a good time. Like, we don't need to be so embarrassed.
It's so interesting too, because I feel like, you want to be sensitive to someone who is losing a little bit of independence.
Yes.
But also, like, can you be aware of the people around you who are experiencing, have to participate in your life when you get to that point?
Yeah, it's true. I know. I can imagine, like, some of my people who are losing in my life that are losing independence are so frustrated and they will snap at me. But it sounds like this woman is already like highly has lost independence. You know, it just sounds like she's mean to people.
Yeah. I feel like once you're falling down, you know, that's something to really be paying attention to because that's so dangerous.
Yes.
For older people.
Yeah, it's true. But it also sounds like she's not very social. Yeah. You know, so.
Which could be a problem.
Yeah.
If you fall down by yourself, it's like if
you
a
have
tree
no one.
Fell in the woods and nobody was there to hear it.
Yeah. Throw a party.
Okay, so here at True Home Confessions, you're standing in for friendly advice, Nikki. So our confessor called in trying to get some great advice. What is one thought that you would leave her with?
Oof. I guess I would say put yourself first and your phone on Do Not Disturb.
You heard it first. I cannot wait to find out if this is advice that our confessor should be following. That is Nikki Bon. Next up, we have our expert, certified financial planner and money trauma expert, Shauna Game. It's going to be so good, you guys. Friends, I have a confession. We own a beautiful 1927 Spanish-style home. And when it rained, I kid you not, I used to have to run around the house and put towels under the windowsills to collect all the water that poured in. It was bananas. I waited for years to replace the old wood windows because I was afraid the new ones wouldn't match the authentic style of my home. When I couldn't put it off any longer, I worked with Renewal by Andersen, and they put all my nitpicky fears at ease. When I work with a brand, I'm big on real relationships. You are only going to hear from companies that I have vetted myself. And I can tell you the people at Renewal by Andersen are the best. I'm not just saying that because I'm a brand ambassador. I truly love this brand. If you need new windows and doors, here's a little offer for you. Buy one window or door and get one 40% off, plus an additional $200 off your entire purchase when you buy 4 or more. Special financing is available. Are you in? Give Renewal by Andersen a call at 844-290-2458. Back to the show. We're going to talk about that confession and thoughts from the amazing Nikki Bon with our expert, Shauna Game. Let's get into it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Shauna, on the Everyone's Talking Money podcast that you've been hosting for years with over 26 million downloads, cough, cough, that is amazing. You talk about personal finance, money, relationships, mental health, money therapy, and so much more. As a certified financial planner and money trauma expert, you really are the exact right person to field this for our caller.
I cannot wait to get into this because there are so many different dynamics. And I think what's so amazing about this is it's something that we will all universally, more likely, experience.
Friend of the show, Nikki Bon says, you have to treat your parents like children. If you've been a tyrant, I'll have you on the other side of that duplex. But if you don't think you need help, fine. I'm not doing anything for you. Thoughts?
Lots of thoughts. Well, you know, what she's talking about is a form of an intervention. That's what kept kind of coming up to me, right? She wanted to just kind of take the mom in the middle of the night and send her off to that home, regardless of what she thought. You know, I think in the real world, in real life, it's this juggling act, this emotional and financial juggling act, because on one hand, I think you're always thinking, what do I owe my parent? I mean, my parents parented me. They financially raised me to some extent. And what do I actually owe them in return? And what is the financial cost associated with that? And how much of my life do I put on hold in order to accommodate my parent? And I think that's a really tricky question that there isn't, unfortunately, like a right or wrong answer. I mean, we want it to be as easy as Nikki's answer. But I think my mom might have some words if I, put a bag over her head and took her in the middle of the night to an old age home.
My mom's going to have words with me over this episode. Also, Nikki said, if she was terrible, you don't owe her shit. Put yourself first and put your phone on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah, I mean, I like her going for it. It's some pretty strong advice. And I think it really speaks to the complexity of our relationships with our parents. And I know a lot of people who have these sort of thoughts about, what will happen when their parents need help or maybe their parents need to move in, and they share Nikki's sentiment. But I think practically speaking, when it boils down to us, we all have a little bit of a soft spot inside of us for our parents, even if they totally muck things up when we were kids, because the relationship kind of switches, right? And you do become a little bit of a parent to your parents, and who else is going to care for them, or who else is going to take care of them? And when we look at the costs of going into, whether it's some sort of retirement community or it's a nursing home or somebody needs long-term care assistance, those are very expensive propositions. And most people aren't sitting on a couple $100,000 of cash, if not more, depending on how long your elderly parent needs care for, to just fork over. So the question becomes, what do you do? And I think that brings us back to the caller who was like, I had my life set up to buy a house with my partner, and now I've got this new dilemma.
Okay, so I want to get into all of that, but beforehand, we have a little bit of business to do. True Home Confessions asks, are we taking this friendly advice? Did Nikki get it right?
I would say asterisk mark, it depends.
That sounds about right. So as much as I had the best giggle at all of that, I feel like there are some really serious thoughts that we're going to go through here. And I feel like there's a lot of emotional stuff here and there's a lot of financial stuff. So in my brain, I think we could tackle this best if we divide it financially and emotionally. And I would love to start with financially. You heard the confession. Our caller is thinking about using their savings and going in on a duplex with their mother, who it sounds like also has some savings. Maybe we could chat through some sort of pros and cons. Generally speaking, do you feel like it's a good idea to buy a house with an elderly parent?
I think it depends on what type of situation we're talking about. Like, are there already some health issues that we're having to deal with? Like, what is the level of activity for your elderly spouse? Are they still getting around okay? Or are they needing more assistance? I think so. It's kind of examining it on that level. But from a financial standpoint, it could be a good decision, actually, certainly in places that are super expensive, like California and New York, where the cost of real estate, it's a lot of money. So if you have a parent who's willing to come in and fork over a portion or all of the down payment, whatever it might be, let alone share the living expenses and just all of that stuff that's just so expensive, this could be potentially a real kind of win-win situation, because then you, as the child, you've got more cash, you can invest your money, you can, maybe you buy a rental real estate property. I don't know, but you can use that money to build your wealth versus you just having to fork that all over for a down payment. So from a pro side of things, just purely looking at the math, it could work in your favor if that's the situation where your aging parent does have some cash available to them. If they don't, then it's a little bit of a different conversation, because then you're having to figure out how you're going to afford the entire household and how you're going to afford the care. And so really understanding the situation and understanding the costs associated is an important conversation I think you need to have first.
That makes sense to me. Also, as you're getting older, I think life gets a little more scary and intimidating. And some of the parts of this phase that are happening to our elderly parent, I think, this is partly why people get angry and frustrated, and, the world is shifting around them, and, they're probably super frustrated with like the chipping away of your independence and your autonomy. Maybe you can't drive anymore. Maybe you don't feel comfortable doing things that you used to do, and you're dependent on someone else, paid or unpaid, family or a service, for some help with things. And I imagine that transition is super frustrating.
There are so many different studies that show that elderly parents go through some level of anxiety, depression. Like, one of the recommendations I would give in this scenario is, if you're all open to it, go to a therapist. If there are these heavy emotions, there are certainly financial therapists or just traditional therapists where you can talk about some of these emotions that might be harder to just sit down and have a conversation about. But,
Sure.
With a guided professional, you can explore these so that, maybe you understand what's underneath some anger or some bitterness, or, all of those emotions that are difficult when you're younger to understand. But the parent is, they're freaking out. They're approaching the end of their life, and it doesn't look good.
Oh my God. I laugh, but that's just funny because it's going to happen to all of us. We're all going to be that person, for better or for worse, in whatever situation. But yeah, I feel like maybe the beginning of this is that assessment, right? Where we're saying, what condition is mom in physically? What condition is both of our wallet in, right? Like a hard look at what you're coming into this complicated situation with. But my brain actually says, well, what happens if this place doesn't work for mom anymore at some point? Like the caller mentioned that mom falls a little bit, which kind of put up a red flag for me. And we'll bring that up again later too. But I think coming into that conversation with a therapist or someone who can be a neutral party might help this be less emotionally charged. Because otherwise you're sitting across the table and you're saying, I don't want to spend money on that. And the other person's hearing, you don't want to spend money on me, right? Or like, I need this. And, if you're having to sort of check in with each other and say, do you really need this? Or could we dial this back? And so I feel like some of that give and take, especially with the flipping of the parental role, could be kind of yucky, where like your parent used to tell you what to do, and maybe you've evened out in your sort of mature age, but then you're telling your parent what to do. And man, that just sounds like a fight waiting to happen.
Well, and we're dealing with two super taboo subjects here. We're dealing with money, which is one of the biggest taboo topics that most of us don't like to talk about, don't like to deal with. It's kind of the elephant in the room. And most of us have not had frank and open conversations with our partners, let alone our family members or our parents, about money. And so we really don't know. They could say, oh, I'm fine financially, but what does that actually look like? How do we actually quantify that? And then on top of that, we're stacking this layer of you're aging and we have to explore other housing options. So you put those two giant taboo topics that are just filled with emotion together, and it feels like it's just a, simmering pot, like ready to explode.
And I think part of it too is because there's a third person in this equation. It's not just a parental relationship with this daughter and mother. She's married, and she and her husband have been saving up hopes and dreams, aiming toward buying this first home together and getting out of an apartment, having a backyard that they can throw parties, which is so cute. I'm like, I totally get that. When you come from an apartment and you just want to have like that first barbecue, that is so real. Or like let your dog out in the backyard. They're just like, they're ready to move into this next phase of their life. And you can hear this fear of what this frank conversation, frankly, is about to like unload on all three of these people's life.
I'm a old school fan of doing a just complete pro cons list and thinking about all of those things. Not only you brought up the spouse, does the spouse get along with the mom?
Right.
What's their relationship like? Are you thinking about having kids? What would that look like?
Right.
So it's thinking about it from lots of different dimensions. And that's where I think bringing in a therapist and bringing in a financial team, so a financial planner, a CPA, an estate planner, like all of these different professionals that can help you think about this from a broader perspective than you maybe are able to because you're so emotionally involved.
What is a money therapist?
That's a very good question. So it's a relatively new therapeutic model, I would say, that has been developed over the last few years. I specifically deal with trauma around money, and all of us, to some extent, this caller is talking about a certain level of trauma around money. It's these fears, these blocks, what do I owe my parent financially? That is a source of money trauma, because you're trying to weigh out how you were raised and your relationship with money. And so financial therapy is being able to talk through your beliefs, your stories, your scripts, your money personality, your thoughts and feelings around money, so that you have a deeper understanding of how you can move through some of those tough emotions, typically shame, blame, and judgment, so that you can move closer to your goals in a much healthier perspective and be able to reach them, I think, with a certain level of ease that maybe you hadn't been able to before.
I love your idea of pros and cons. That feels like a juicy way to attack this. So I feel like the first pro that you gave me was like sharing living expenses together could be a great idea. We talked a little bit too about being emotionally supported by being closer together. So as this parent is going through this process, they have somebody right on the other side of the wall if something really goes wrong. What else is a good pro for this?
Well, there could be tax advantages. This is one of the reasons you want to work with an accountant or a CPA, even just to hire one for an hour, just to kind of pick their brain. But there are some tax benefits. Potentially, there's a dependent care benefit, depending on what sort of level of support you offer for your aging parent. Okay. And then, interesting, however you decide to purchase the property, you could potentially divide the mortgage interest deduction between both of you. One of you could take more, one of you could take less. And so I think that conversation comes down to just, what do your taxes look like? What do your parents' taxes look like? And, what works out favorable for both of you. So I think the tax thing alone is merit to, opening this financial conversation up for a broader, interpretation and, experience and knowledge from other professionals that can really say, okay, this is the way you should set it up so that it helps both of you.
Okay. I'm starting to hear a team, like a hero team coming together for this chat. We've got the money therapist. We've got some sort of CPA or tax person. What do you think could be some of the real negatives? I could see a bunch of them.
Yeah. I mean, Nikki talked about them. The caller talked about them. Obviously, there's a lack of privacy issue, because no matter how you structure she was talking about a duplex, but whether they're living in your home or your duplex, you're still neighbors. You're still sharing some level. Yeah. We are still sharing some level of space. And so this comes back to, what was your relationship like? What is it like now? What are going to be those bombs that kind of go off between you? What are the house rules? Can you establish that? So, I think you really want to find a space that is equivalent to your level of privacy needs and independent space for each of you. So whether that's, a duplex could be a great option, but it could not be. I mean, you mentioned things like stairs, like how mobile is the mom, and what is that going to look like in the future? So thinking about those sorts of things, we could rope in here, obviously, a real estate professional to help us find, a property that's going to maybe be one level and maybe going to have, an in and out for the mom, or, those sort of things I think are important to think about, that you're not going to think about when you're younger and you're just looking at a house for like, oh my gosh, I want my dream house.
I know for me, one thing I have seen a lot of people do when you have a duplex is, if you have shared communal back and front yard, giving someone privacy by walling off a smaller garden. So maybe the backyard area is more for the couple, and maybe the front yard is for mom. Maybe you give her a walled in little beautiful garden, but sort of using the idea of dividing up some of the outdoor spaces so that she could maybe step out of her bedroom into a cute little place to drink coffee. And it's not the shared, you're not like, hello, sort of like waving to each other in the backyard and like your jammies. So I kind of feel like, oh God, or worse. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. I feel like there are some creative real estate ways or home improvement ways that you could explore that too. So feel like we just added another person to our all-star team.
Well, and we added, I didn't even think about this level of complexity, but yeah, I mean, you're in a marriage. Like, how are you going to have sex if you're in the same house and mom's right there? So, that's just another complication to think about.
Maybe just don't put your headboard on the shared wall.
Or give mom like a really good pair of like, noise canceling headphones or something, and just tell her, these are your quiet hours.
Hearing is one of the first things to go, right? So hopefully that's where we're at. What else is a real con, babe? I feel like you know so many good things on this subject. What else feels like a red flag for you?
Well, this is one of the reasons that a lot of families need therapy around these situations is I don't know if there are other siblings involved or who else is kind of in the equation here, but you deciding to purchase a house with your mom, what happens when your mom passes away? So how is that house titled?
Oh, wow.
Who gets that percentage of ownership? Who gets that piece of the appreciation? And, I could tell you so many horror stories of siblings who thought they were going to get something. And then one parent had an agreement with one sibling and not the other sibling. And,
oh, no.
At the end, they're here at like a will and trust reading, and people are just screaming at each other and throwing things and all sorts of stuff. Those are important things to think about and conversations to have while you might be seemingly doing something really great for your parent.
Right.
Is there another sibling or somebody else who is wondering, well, what's going to happen to my inheritance, or what's going to happen to that other half of the duplex when she passes away? And so just another, level of complexity to think about in this really tricky situation.
I am actually just going through creating family trust, all that paperwork. It is such a process. And I think really truly spelling out your wishes and being really clear about this stuff it's eye-opening, first of all, and just understanding how that process works. How do you set these things up so that they make sense? But putting it in writing in advance. And I feel like having a document that says mom's money is going to be used to take care of mom. This is what we do. In the event of mom's passing, this is what happens. And having a series of conversations about that, because frankly, while you were talking, what occurred to me? What happens if mom runs out of money?
Yes.
Here we are thinking, great, mom's got her half, but what if her care suddenly becomes really urgent and maybe she can't actually be cared for in the house anymore? Maybe she needs to move out and be cared for somewhere else. Are we trying to reverse mortgage her half of the house and try to pull money out so we can pay for her care? That just gets so sticky right there.
It's really complicated and really sticky. But I think if you're having this conversation about a parent moving in or you buying a property with a parent, this is the excellent foundation time to have all of these conversations. Because if you can set a lot of this stuff up right from the get-go, then you can avoid maybe 10 layers of stickiness down the road. You're not going to be able to avoid all of them.
Nope.
But you can use this as a time to, let's get the estate planner involved. Let's get the CPA. Let's get the financial planner. Let's figure this all out as best as we can and get it set up so that when mom gets worse, or like you said, mom can't live in the house, we've got an actual plan for it. Yeah. And I think most people just don't, we wait until we get in that moment, and then all of those emotions come up and we're just in over our heads. And so if we can back up a little bit and think about it proactively, I think that's probably the best piece of advice.
I did like Nikki's idea about hiring a tyrant, giving our confessor's mom a job. I would totally pay her to do that for me. Maybe this is a later in life source of income that we all should be exploring.
I love it. Yeah. What was her advice on Spectrum, I believe?
Spectrum. Yeah. And medical bills, which frankly, who wouldn't want to pay somebody else to get on the phone and deal with all their medical annoyance? You also have another set of these relationships, right? We have in-laws if you're married, in-laws and outlaws, these relationships where you may take on your partner's family as well. And then you maybe are making some of these decisions multiple times, right?
Absolutely. Right. And it's every set of parents, it's going to be something different because they're all going to have different financial needs. They're all going to have different health needs. And so I think it's a subject that we can't avoid.
And I know there's a lot of people who enter into this phase of life with no savings, both sides. So these are even more complicated conversations if people are not making any money. So I know there's definitely some privilege here in that these people are both coming into this equation with a little bit of cash and some options. So obviously this gets only far more complicated the less that you have in your bank account and the less secure your jobs are.
And we're talking about it from the perspective of the mom coming in and us helping the parent, but also we could look at it from a little bit of a flip side where you decide to go into this arrangement with a parent because maybe they are more financially well off than you. And
Sure.
maybe it works out more beneficial for you in this type of arrangement. So these things can kind of go either which way. I think it just depends again on the situation, on the financial resources for each party involved. And, you know, what is that level of care and need for the parent?
You know, I ask my mom for advice a lot, and I thought I would just reach out to her on this one because we were talking about parents so much. And also, my mom is an advocate for the aunties and great aunties and grannies in my life. And she interacts with a lot of them back in Maryland where I grew up. So I shared the confession with her, and here's what she said to me. Before you make this important of a decision, there needs to be a serious family meeting to discuss relationship problems, basic rules and expectations, but before this family could think of making this duplex work, they need to address the mother's current physical red flags. And I think that's a really important thing to come back to. Falling and having trouble walking are real considerations that are not going to be solved by her just living next door. Again, this is still my mom's great advice. The greatest risk an adult faces is falling. Find out what's causing the falls and is it chronic? Is it going to keep happening? Mother should be assessed for the level of care she needs and might need in the future. That actually seems like step one.
I agree. I think
we're talking about all this other stuff, but like, as Bonnie says, step one is let's take care of finding out what's really going on with her health. It also occurred to me too that you should have these conversations sooner rather than later, because sometimes as we get older, there are things like cognitive decline, like maybe you're creeping up on some dementia, or maybe there's hearing loss even, which makes it hard for older parents to really understand and grasp what you're saying. So like the earlier you can have these conversations before they become dire, and while everybody is still on the same page in terms of what they can understand and make a plan, you know, talking to your parent about their goals before this stuff gets hardcore just seems to make so much sense.
I agree. And I think that's where we talk about these layers of complexity. Like the longer we wait and the more complicated the situation gets from a health perspective and a financial perspective, the more difficult it is to create a good plan, because sometimes we're just in a situation where we're trying to put out fires and we're trying to figure out the best solution and a bunch of really bad solutions or bad options. And so you know, I mean, that's really, I think, my hope. I know that this caller was really in sort of a emotional bind around this. And then I know Nikki had a real emotional pull to this too. But I just hope it opens up someone's thinking about, well, maybe I do need to have that conversation with my parents, or maybe I do need to ask them a few extra questions and start having a sense of curiosity rather than maybe a sense of, judgment based off of, you know, how you're raised.
Yeah. The emotional stuff is big too. We really covered some great financial stuff, but I want to kind of like dive into that emotional stuff. One of the things that I did catch was she said, "What do I owe my terrible aging mother?" And that I thought was a really interesting choice of words. Now, Nikki and I have gone down the rabbit hole of how terrible this mother could actually be, obviously. But you know, she astutely picked up too that like, was the mom terrible your whole life? Or is this person going senile or having, you know, mental health issues or depression? Is this relationship getting sour as you get older?
I think it's a really interesting conversation starter, because I know in lots of other cultures, certainly not here in the United States, but lots of other cultures really value the parents and the grandparents, and it's expected that you live together. This is multi-generational living, and it's a cultural responsibility. And I think we don't feel that as much here in the United States. I'm just speaking with broad strokes here. And I think that it's interesting because we so very much want our own identities, and we so very much want to shed whatever happened to us as a child, but you are still ultimately the child of that parent. We can't change that relationship. And I think if you are having that reaction about your parent, maybe that's time for you to do some more like introspection and think about, again, has it been terrible the whole life? Is it just terrible because there's some sort of underlying health issue going on? Is it terrible? Maybe they recently lost their spouse and they're dealing with some level of depression, there could be dementia. I mean, there could be so many different factors. And I think it's just really easy to say, oh, my parent was terrible. I don't have any responsibility for them. But then I think when you're actually in that situation, I hope at least there's some sense of gratitude that comes out. Not that I'm saying you have to take care of your parent for the rest of your life, but I don't know. I think maybe we need to all embrace a little bit more of that respect. And, we want somebody to care for us too when we're old and we're crotchety and we're maybe a terrible person.
I do a bunch of research for each of these episodes. And one of the things that I was digging on was how many people have a strained relationship with their parents. And on the farthest end of this spectrum, I really came across some conversations out there in the wild about people who had an abusive parent and what do they owe that parent in their old age. The CDC had a statistic that at any given time, up to 20% of all children have suffered some sort of abuse or neglect, which, holy crap, that is the worst statistic I can't even, 20%. That's so shocking to me.
I actually think it would have been higher.
I don't know. That maybe I'm just being like naive on that, but that really surprised me. And so that means that at any given time, 20% of adults are coming into this conversation thinking about a parent who was abusive or neglectful or perhaps addicted and was a shitty parent for real. And on one hand, I've processed what you just said, and I do think Americans are so independent and we push so hard to escape our parents and be somebody different. And then it's like, well, yeah, but there's so many benefits to having closer relationships that, I think we suffer from too. But I come back to this idea that it's very possible that you had an actually terrible parent, someone who full of rage or super mentally ill or addicted or abusive. And when they come calling and you get older and you're an adult trying to live your own life, maybe you've been through a ton of therapy, you're as a money trauma expert and just someone knowledgeable about some of these sticky things, like when they come back looking for money or looking for help, maybe they blew all their money too, by the way. Like this could be someone who, like a boomer living it up, had so much wealth and spent it all. And then this angry, bitter, older person who was nasty to you comes back and is like, now I need help. Like, what do you do with that? What do you do with that?
It's what you're talking about. It's so hard to deal with. I have somebody in my life who has experienced a situation very similar to that and really struggled with what to do. And I think that it is very real. And I know that, the best advice that I've been able to give is trying to find some level of peace within yourself. And this usually, it helps to have a therapist. There are lots of different now very affordable ways to, to have a therapist, to hire a therapist, to work with somebody. There's all different modalities that can help you process this trauma, but you holding on to the trauma actually keeps you stuck in a trauma response. And not that you owe your parents, specifically if you've been abused or some really horrific situation, you might not owe your parent anything. But what you do owe is yourself being able to find a way to, move forward in life without being kind of trapped in what happened to you in the past. And it's tough work. It takes a lot of time and a lot of shedding of things that are just uncomfortable. And so you might not owe your parent anything. And that might just be okay. As horrible as that may sound, that might be the situation. But I want to make sure that if you have experienced something yourself, that you get the help you need to just be able to be in a place where you feel like you can function and where you're not still trapped in whatever happened to you as a kid.
Right. Like just taking care of that parent, reintroduce the feelings and the relationships and the patterns, and like, how do you make choices about whether you're going to support that person or not, or interact with that person or not, but without kicking off all those patterns again.
Or could it be a place of healing? Could it be a place of having conversations that maybe you've just never had? Who knows? Who knows?
I'm struck by how empathetic you are. I can feel it. It always comes through when I listen to your podcast and when I hear you talk. You just, it feels like a warm hug. And I'm just wondering if there is something in your life have you ever been in a traumatic relationship or a toxic relationship that gave you all of that empathy?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have.
If you're okay talking about it.
Of course. I got married when I was pretty young. I was 24, and I definitely did not know myself. I thought I knew myself, and I chose a partner that was not right for me. And he had a lot of interpersonal trauma that he had not processed through himself, and did not really, I think, truly understand who he was. He didn't have a pathway to be authentically himself. And so it was a tough marriage. There wasn't fighting or anything like that. It was just a lot of non-communicating, a lot of just people passing, ships passing in the night, kind of experience. And it did a lot for me. It really took a toll on my self-confidence, on how I showed up, how I presented myself. There was also a level of financial complexity because at certain points he made more money than I did. He controlled a lot of the finances. Even though I was a money expert, there were a lot of things that I did not have a grasp on. And then when we got divorced, the tables had switched and he was no longer working his job and I was the financially dependent one. And so basically in the process, I walked away with 0 assets and a lot of debt in the process. But I felt like it was a pathway to helping both of us be able to be the people that we needed to be, or at least for me. I have no contact with him. I have no idea what his life looks like now. And that also working for 15 plus years with people and their finances, I know that it is not as simple as what it looks on the outside. Yeah. It never is. And people that you think have everything together, when you look under the hood, sometimes it isn't. And so for me, these are really tough subjects that we're dealing with. There are a lot of emotions and it's scary. And so my approach has always been to be able to be empathetic and to be a sounding board and to be a place where people felt like they could express themselves in a way that they were not going to be met with shame, judgment, fear, and all of those other terrible emotions.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that makes that's part of the brilliance of your show and the way you show up for people. And hopefully somebody listening to this can really feel that this is a sticky spot. And I think some of us can really do some stuff to get in front of that. Like you said, you're making choices for how you doing the best you can with what you've got today, but at some point that person's not going to be there anymore. And how can you feel like you did the best you could with everything you had while you had it? The other thing that I know is I did a little bit of digging, and some states have a law that says you have to take care of your parents. It's called a filial responsibility law. Over 30 states have this law.
Really?
So if you're ready to just jettison your parents, you should go look it up and figure it out. I think a lot of it is really medical bill related specifically, but I thought that was actually really interesting because I was like, I took that question at face value from our caller. What do I owe my terrible aging parent? Do you actually legally owe them something? And in some states you do. So
you better look that up. Yeah, everybody's like now going to Google right now.
Before you toss your parents out the window, you probably still have to pay their medical bills, so behave yourself. Okay, so if our confessor was to ignore all of your other advice and they only followed one tip from you, what would you say?
I actually would take it back to their call-in and I would throw the question back at them. I think the advice to everyone is the question of what do you owe your parent? And I think it's getting to the bottom of that question and having you really sit and think about it. I think that is the number one takeaway from this conversation.
I love that. Nikki says, put yourself first, put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Shauna says, ask yourself this very important question before you need to. My mom says, falling down is a red flag. Figure that out and make a plan. I would say this is just extremely deep and personal. And even if it's super uncomfortable, this is worth asking yourself before it matters. Or if it started to matter, ask it right away and maybe build a team of people that can help you with this. Yeah, I don't know. Any last thoughts, my friend?
I think there is so much good advice in this episode. Even if you just take it for face value and have a good laugh, I think it's still going to open up this internal conversation of, yeah, what would I do in that situation?
And by the way, I think you and I need to put together a little download of some of your best financial tips on this. We really got buried in some of the emotional stuff, as we should have, but you have some excellent financial tips that I would love to share with people. So we'll find a great place to put that. If you're listening and if you have a confession, you can email it over to me at truehomeconfessions@gmail.com, or you can call and leave a message, 323-716-2107 on the confession line. I want to thank you for listening, for all the ways that you can find Nikki Bon and Shauna Game, as well as that download for sure, which everybody needs. Hit the notes. And please, please consider sharing this with a friend who might need it. Thanks for hanging out, and hit subscribe, and let's do it again.